So my name is Gabi Melson. I actually grew up in Barkersville, Indiana. I grew up with my sister and my two brothers, and we lived with my dad. Unfortunately, we grew up in some hard circumstances. Now there was just custody issues and a multitude of battles to overcome when we were younger. So I lived in Barkersville up until I was about 12, 13. Then my family moved to Plainfield. After moving to Plainfield, we stepped away from our home church, and I quickly fell into drugs. I fell into a pit of despair, truly, where I no longer found my hope in God. I found my hope in the world, and it was to my absolute detriment. I was the youngest of three girls altogether, and my sisters were beautiful. They were picture perfect, and I was a little girl with Harry Potter glasses and messed up bob cut. I very much felt unseen. I felt unheard. I felt like I just did not have the love that I craved. And so I grew up feeling one in the shadow of how beautiful my sisters were, but also under that understanding of we were kind of taught, if you look this way, people will be nicer to you. They'll help you out more. So in the world, I sought for attention. I sought for immediate satisfaction was truly what I found my faith in. As long as I can, chase this thing and I know it's going to make me feel better immediately was what I really searched for. And I found it in a multitude of different things. I found my faith in basically everything the world could offer me. I spent from 14 up until 19, I was addicted to drugs. I was homeless. I was in a horrible relationship at the time. I actually did sober up for a few months. I decided that I was going to look back to the church, look back to see if I could find some sense of fellowship, looking to see if I could find some sense of love that I knew was there because of where I was as a kid and what I was brought up into. So I got involved with a church, and I quickly was reminded of the love that is shared between believers, the love that's shared when God is present. But I was still had all my mess. I was still struggling with drugs during that time. I was still struggling with these thoughts of not feeling like enough. And the church had found out about a relapse that I had had. And the response to that relapse was not one of comfort. It felt as though, here my sin is out for the world to see. And
were you basically like just told you can't come back anymore?
Yep.
Because this is in your life right now?
Yep. They,
I mean, that
verbatim was like, you're not allowed to be here anymore. This was such a forceful and humiliating experience, the way that it was done. And of course, what happened thereafter. I mean, truly, I was absolutely just like not allowed to do anything. Nobody was like, hey, let me pray with you through this time. Let's get through it. It was, we found out what you've been doing. We don't think that you belong here, is truly the exact sentiment that they stated to me. And that particular experience was one of just true confusion. I was confused. This was supposed to be the place that I was finding that love, I was finding that support, and here I am not receiving that. And what is a person to do then if they try to go to the church and the church isn't welcoming with open arms and loving the sinner that I am? Who do you go to then? And so I went right back to my faith in the world. I went right back to having those immediate desires and truly, again, putting that relationship that I had with God aside, because it still was not fulfilling this void. I was still struggling with that. After that event, I very much associated God's heart for me with those people. I felt as though because those people did not help me the way that I thought that they were going to help me, that was God telling me, we don't want you anymore. Who are you to seek this relationship, especially after all that you've done? And that led through even more years of just disbelief and a really hardened heart about it, to the point where I questioned God's existence in that time. And in 2022, I got diagnosed with a gene disorder. What happened was I was at such a low point that I was suicidal. So I went to a hospital and we did some tests and we found out that my brain cannot handle stress. So what it would do is it would cause panic attacks in order to send dopamine to my system to help relieve some of that stress. And the doctor said my brain was the equivalent to a Vietnam vet with extreme PTSD, with how swollen that part of my brain was. And so after hearing that diagnosis, I actually have an aunt in Texas who is a doctor in neuroscience, and she called me and she said, I found out about your diagnosis, and I want you to know that you are not going to get through this without Jesus. And that was such a overwhelming response to hear, because I had such anger in my heart. So how dare you, being a doctor, tell me that the only way I'm going to get through this is with Jesus? I tried that. I had such a anger towards that for about 2 years. I, was constantly told, you're not going to get through this without Jesus. And that brain disorder actually led to, I wasn't able to keep a job. I couldn't leave to go to the grocery store because of panic attacks. I was in constant therapies, but multitudes of different medications, and nothing was working. It was in February of this year. I was couch surfing. I was staying at a friend's house. I was still in the midst of my addiction. I was jobless, didn't have a home. I had no hope about what was going to happen, how I was going to push through this. My brain was still causing me issues. No medicine was working. What am I going to do? I was just sitting in my friend's room, and I felt this overwhelming presence of it felt like God saying to me, are you ready? You have tried all of these things. You have put your faith in people. You have put your faith in drugs, in, the attitudes of others. You've put your faith in everything else, and it's not worked. Are you finally ready to put your faith in me? So I prayed to God, and I asked him to come into my life. And in that moment, when I prayed that prayer, my mind was quiet. And I remember just sobbing, being like, thank you for finally, for the first time in years, I have peace, I have silence. All of those things I had to go through, the joblessness, this disorder, the addictions, the horrible relationships. I had to go through those things because he needed me at true rock bottom to finally get to me, to say, are you ready? Are you finally ready to stop putting your faith in all of these things and put your faith in me? What I would say to somebody if they asked me, why should I put faith in God? My response would be because we are not created to live a life without him. God did not create you in your mother's womb to just leave you. We are created to be in fellowship with him. We are not meant to live life without his love. That's why he sent his son to die for our sins so that we may be reconciled to him. All he asks is to just put your faith in him so that he can have a relationship with you.